Peter Pan, The Backup Plan, Adventures in Babysitting, and A River Runs Through It is the full title of the latest episode of The Conners, episode 5 of season 4. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It, and welcome to my Conners review. We are trudging along through season 4, episode 5 now, with that big, long title that we'll get into momentarily. But if you are new to Dan Reviews It, thank you for finding this video. I hope you enjoy watching the Conners as much as I do. And this is a review video, so we're not going to be showing the episode. We're just going to be talking about it. So plain and simple. But please consider subscribing down below there. We reached 850 subs last week. So heading towards 900 now, which would be awesome. My plan is to get 1,000 by the end of 2021. So if you have not subscribed yet, would love to have you aboard with that. Let's get right into this episode. This is an odd one because it has 4 different things in the title. Usually there's 3 and they're different topics. But yes, I suppose all of these things do factor in. But what's interesting is the first 2, Peter Pan and The Backup Plan, both have to do with Becky. And then Adventures in Babysitting and A River Runs Through It both have to do with Darlene. Although I guess River Runs Through It could also be a little bit about Dan and Louise as well, with their virtual reality honeymoon. But Darlene meets an old classmate who is now named River, so I sort of took it to mean that was part of the Darlene thing. So really, we just have the Becky story, the Darlene story, Darlene/Harris, I guess. And then the C story, which isn't really mentioned in the title, is Dan and Louise. So we'll talk about that first. So in our last episode, Dan and Louise got married. I had a question in the comments of my last video about whether that was a legal marriage or not, because Jackie, performed it and is not maybe, an actual priest or whatever. But look, you can get ordained with those Church of Life of Modesto, California, there's so many different ones where you can get ordained online, and it is legal. From my understanding, the most important thing really is the marriage license. So as long as you have that, you can kind of do whatever for the actual ceremony, I believe. But I'm not married, so maybe that's not entirely true. But yes, in terms of that, I am pretty sure Dan and Louise have a legal marriage, even though it was done by Jackie. This is a legit thing. So anyway, due to some roof issues and some fix-it stuff around the house with that, Dan cannot afford a honeymoon. So Dan and Louise are not going on a honeymoon, and so Becky brings them this virtual reality thing, and she was like, hey, you guys can go down the Amazon, which, could be the river kind of thing. Or you can, go to Florida and Gator World and all this stuff. So Dan loves this idea, and, they both try it out, him and Louise, for a little bit, but Dan really attaches himself to it because I think it makes him feel better about not being able to pay for the wedding, or for the honeymoon, rather. Whereas Louise is more like, look, dude, it's cool. I get it. Like, no big deal. We can have our honeymoon wherever we are, let's use our own imaginations instead of this technology. And knowing Louise's character, that totally makes sense, right? So that was fine, but that was pretty much all with that. The only other thing with Dan was early on in the episode, Darlene comes in and asks him about, basically about Ben, if he's seeing anybody. She sort of asks about the hardware store instead, but there's this sort of back and forth about her sad eyes and, to go take your sad eyes into the kitchen, which she does. And then we see Harris and the twins, or well, I guess they're not twins, but the kids. Aldo is her tattoo artist, boss and boyfriend currently, and he's got these 2 kids that are very creepy, and they're sort of, a little bit like the Shining girls, I guess. So they're creepy, perfect for the Halloween week episode. And I should actually pause there and say that this is the Halloween episode that we're getting this year for the Conners. It is not a traditional Halloween episode that Roseanne or the Conners would do with all of the costumes and the trick-or-treat gags and haunted houses and all of that stuff. There are several references, though, to Halloween. In the very beginning, Darlene asks her dad about the full-size candy bars that they're giving out. And we also, the Peter Pan portion of the title refers to dressing up at the Lanford Lunchbox, which is now a sports bar. Is it still called the Lunchbox? I guess it is, right? But it's a sports bar, so there's not, it's more, I feel like, of a night bar. Whatever. They haven't really went too much into detail with that. But as far as I know, the name is still the same, I think. Unless I'm misremembering. But, and that happens. So comment, you always let me know in the comments if I misremember something. I know that. But anyway, so, Jackie was dressed as Peter Pan and, Becky was dressed as Tinkerbell. So that's sort of, Halloween-y as well. And then at the very end of the episode, the little tag, which was pretty funny, was about these creepy kids of Aldo's, wanting to basically murder one of Dan's chickens. And he's like, sure, first let me dig some holes in the ground and you guys can lay in them to make sure I dug them properly. And that was, spooky themed and everything. So you knew it was Halloween. But look, at the end of the day, I love the old Halloween episodes from Roseanne. I really do. But that is from an era where we got 24 plus episodes every season. Now we're getting typically about 20. Last year we may have had more if it wasn't for COVID, but 20 to 22 I feel like is ABC's usual now. Even a few years ago it was 23 to 24, like Modern Family, The Middle, those would have 23 and 24 episode seasons, but now 22 seems to be the standard for ABC. But the Connors haven't even gotten there yet. So I'm okay that they don't do an entire episode where we're just going through Halloween. They're fun episodes, but they're kind of fillers. And when you're a few episodes shy of what you used to be, I'm not sure that we necessarily need those filler episodes anymore, even though they are fun. Maybe once every other year, like last year we had one. That was great. So I think that all makes sense. But anyway, back to this particular episode. Yes, there's some Halloween things, but so moving on with I guess we'll continue on with the Darlene storyline since that's what we were talking about with Harris. So Darlene goes to this bookstore with Jackie and then later with Mark, where it's very, earthy and zen and vegan and all of these things that Darlene just loves. And so she's trying to gain some perspective on, figuring out how to deal with this boyfriend of Harris's who is 19 years older than her, and it's freaking her out. And, he's got kids and the mother is, drug addicted. So she doesn't necessarily want Harris around that portion at all. But in the mix there, she meets one of her old high school buddies, Gail, Pale Gail, she used to call him. And that led us into a new nickname for Darlene that we had not heard before, Dark Lean, which is pretty funny, makes sense from the very brooding Darlene of the 90s. But now this guy Gale goes by River, and I guess he owns the bookstore or whatever. So they came back the next day. She came back with Mark because the speaker of one of these books, or the writer of one of these books was speaking. And Darlene was hoping maybe to get some insight into, how to center herself more and that kind of thing. It's a little bit weird to me that Darlene wouldn't have gone through that sort of phase. I know we're tackling Darlene's religion a lot this season and, her willingness to believe and things that maybe we hadn't known about her before. But it does seem a little odd, I guess, that in all of her years of doing, the veganism and the more earthy type stuff, that she wouldn't have looked into one of these spiritual type of, quote unquote religions. Centering herself and Tao and Zen. And it just strikes me as a little odd. She never would have looked into that at all. But all right, I get it. So she ends up going to dinner with Harris and the boyfriend and tries some reverse psychology, suggests that they move in together because she is thinking that Aldo's going to run then and Harris will see him for who he really is. But instead, he's like, oh man, you beat me to it. Here's a key to my place. whatever. So kind of backfires in that respect. So I sort of like this storyline. Harris has sort of been back and forth on different men in the previous seasons. None of them seem to stick. And that, like we talked about last week, they certainly have played with age differentials in dating with this show before, with Jackie and her younger boyfriend back in the day, and even Neville is a lot younger than Jackie, so they've played a little bit with the age stuff. But interesting that we have now somebody who's a lot older, and Darlene is worried, and I think also sees Harris as somebody who makes a lot of rash decisions without thinking, and we've seen that time and again in this series so far, and I think it's why a lot of you in the comments those first few seasons really, really disliked Harris, whereas I feel like I gave her a little bit of a pass because it seemed pretty authentic to 17-year-old girl. But, now that she's a little older, even you guys in the comments, some of you have been like, hey, I'm softening on Harris a little bit. All right, so, how does this storyline grab you? Let me know down below there. Are you into this version of Harris where she's all about this guy and taking care of his kids and everything? Sort of jumping right into the motherhood role. These kids are probably, I don't know, 10 and 12 maybe. No, they're probably, well, yeah, because I guess Mark's probably 14 at least now, right? 14 or 15. So maybe the kids could be 10 and 12 or 9 and 11, something like that. I think they're a couple of years apart. But I think that storyline is completely fine. And then Becky, we've got Peter Pan was the costumes I mentioned, but the backup plan is about Emilio. We were talking about this last week. We haven't seen Emilio yet this season. We haven't really talked much about Beverly Rose this season, but this episode featured both Emilio and a conversation or two about Emily or Beverly Rose. We didn't see the baby, but she was certainly talked about. So Emilio has been, sharing the custody alongside Becky, but because of the way the lunchbox has been turned into a sports bar and it's a little bit maybe violent for a baby to be hanging out there, she wants to sort of change up the custody, and he said that's fine, but let me check with this babe I'm seeing, for the last 3 months, which of course is news to Becky. And she's getting a bit jealous. And so Dan, of course, always the voice of wisdom, asks why that is. Emilio's your backup plan. He's a good-looking dude. You had a baby with him. You're married to him. If you can't find anybody else, it was going to be Emilio in your mind, and maybe now it's not. Look, personally, I would rather she be with Mike. This dude that's guested the last couple of episodes that she took to Dan and Louise's wedding. I like Mike. So I'm perfectly fine with Emilio being sort of out of the picture, except for taking care of the baby. Look, they rushed into getting married because of the baby, because they wanted to keep him sort of legal and all this stuff. So it's like they never really were a couple to begin with. They tried it a little bit, didn't really pan out. I'm fine with him being left aside there. He can go on with his life and be with this other woman. That's fine. I think Becky should focus on her sobriety and then focus on Mike. So I'm fine with that, but I am glad that they addressed it. I'm glad that we talked about it, and I'm glad that Becky is learning a little more about herself and maybe her jealous attributes, and maybe that she was kind of using Emilio a little bit in the back of her mind, having him always there. So, we like that they're dealing with those sorts of issues. So, in terms of the themes of the episode, I'm on board. I like where they're going with things. And actually, I kind of like the fixing of the roof thing. As for why they're not taking a honeymoon. Because here's the thing. This house has been sort of falling apart. Even, I think, in the last season of Roseanne? Of the new Roseanne? I think it was. Or maybe it was the finale of season 1 of The Conners. But anyway, for years now, we've been dealing with, the house falling apart and the mortgage of the house and this and that and the other thing. And, we might lose the house. Darlene and Ben, can you help pay rent? So it makes total sense that Dan, being the practical person he is, as much as he would want to take Louise on a honeymoon, as much as he needs a vacation himself, is going to put that money towards fixing the roof. So I love that they threw that in there. And I love that, I feel like if they took a honeymoon, they would be absent for a couple of episodes. I love Louise. I like that she's becoming more of a regular. I know she's not in the credits, but I think she's been in every episode this season so far. So I'm loving that. So I think it makes total sense that they would put that money aside for the roof instead of frivolously spending it on a honeymoon, which was sort of Ben's point, back with Darlene when she wanted to go to Hawaii. Yes, you need a vacation, but, are you serious about our relationship or not? Darlene was struggling with that issue, and obviously Dan, proved once again, stand-up guy. No, we need to fix the roof. I'm sorry. So I love that. So in terms of the themes of the episode, on board with really all three of them. In terms of the comedy, I was left a little more colder on that end. I had a couple of real hearty laughs, both involving Jackie. One when Jackie and Darlene were at the bookstore, and Jackie made some pithy comment when she was sort of revealing Darlene's past. And then the other one was actually at Jackie's expense when Becky said to her at the lunchbox about, how there's only so much longer I can keep telling people that you're from a different era in excuse for your nonsense behavior. I love those two. Dan, I think, had a good line as well, maybe with the full-size candy bars, but for the most part I didn't find this one a hilarious episode, but I laughed a few times, and I do like the themes throughout. I like where we're going with these storylines. DJ and Mary absent as usual. Actually, we didn't see J.R. Ferguson either. He's a cast regular. His name is in the credits in the beginning, but he was not here either. He was talked about, of course, but so a few people missing from this one, but I think it's all good. We don't have to have everybody in every episode. There's so many intense storylines. I think as long as we've got the core four, really, which is Becky, Darlene, Jackie, and Dan. I think as long as they're in all the episodes. And we've already missed Becky in the live episode, of course. But, all right. Anyway, I think we'll wrap it there. Let me grade this episode. I give Peter Pan, The Backup Plan, Adventures in Babysitting, and A River Runs Through It a B. If it were a little funnier, I would have bumped it up. But storylines were real good. The comedy was a bit mixed for me on this episode. So next week, we do have another new one. And it is another 3-title episode: Young Love, Old Love, and Take This Job and Shove It. So there could be maybe Wellman Plastics issues, which I don't know. It's sort of a bummer. I liked that Darlene was sort of moving up with the management there. I don't know if that's what it is. It could be, Harris's job at the tattoo shop. I don't know. But we'll figure that out next week, I guess. But yes, we'll be getting another new episode next week. So we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye.